In the rolling hills and hollers of the South, there's a vine that creeps into every shadowy, forgotten corner, climbing trees, blanketing fences, and smothering old farmhouses. Kudzu is more than just a plant. It's a metaphor for how things grow wild when left to their own devices. Beauty and chaos not only coexist here, but are also one and the same. The Kudzu Project tries to make sense of it all. The small town struggles, the entangled lives, the deep roots, and the common thread that stitches our communities together. Join us wherever you download podcasts for fresh dispatches from the venerable South with our host, Nick Lucy.
I'm with retired Army Major Bob Johnson, commander of VFW Post 5206 in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being interviewed today. If you wouldn't mind just giving me a little bit of background about your youth, your upbringing, where did you grow up? You had mentioned earlier before we turned the microphones on that your father was in the military as well, and you were born in Monterey, California, where he was stationed at the time?
Yep, he was at the Army Language School. He was a brand freshly commissioned. I was a baby. They had two links, of course, 6 months and a year, and he wanted to stay there for me to be born. So he took a very difficult language so he could stay there a year so I could be born. and from there he went to Germany. And so as an infant, which I don't remember, I lived in Germany. And then his next assignment was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and came back there and was able to stay there about 9 years. And he got involved in the beginnings of Army Special Forces. So so my growing up is remembering, Fayetteville, North Carolina, the school systems, and then seeing my dad. I remember going out to picnics and watching my father jump at the drop zones. And then after the 6th grade, he got sent to Germany, still with Special Forces, and stayed there 2 years. And then we came back to the States, and I moved. I was in 5 different high schools until I graduated in high school in Hampton, Virginia. And from Virginia, I went to Virginia Military Institute, and right in the middle of the Vietnam War, and graduated in 1974. And by then the war was over, but in 1970, we were all on the hook to go into the Army, and we all thought that, we're going to Vietnam, and it just ended in the 4 years we were there. But I was on scholarship, so I served 6 years in the Army, first at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and then I did a tour in Korea and came back to the States, and I was in the 82nd Airborne, and final year was at 18th Airborne Corps headquarters, and I got out from the Army, stayed in the reserves, and retired from the reserves in 1995.
So the Army is pretty much all you've ever known in your life.
Yeah, I've had an ID card of some sort my entire life, from an infant. There was no breaks in the service of having association with the Army.
And then how did you wind up in Hendersonville?
After I got out of the Army, I went to Campbell University, got an MBA, and got into the construction business.
What year would this have been?
81 is when I graduated from Campbell.
Okay.
Started at Ryan Homes, which is a national home builder in Charlotte. I was with them for 4 years and decided I didn't care for Charlotte and looked west. Because as a kid growing up in Fayetteville, the east, the Piedmont, the mountains were alluring. And I found a job here in Hendersonville, actually Fletcher. And so moved from Charlotte to Hendersonville and started different phases of construction. So I had jobs here and locally. I had jobs actually had a job in Reno, Nevada for a year, a job in Roanoke, Virginia. But got into manufacturing of modular homes, got into heavy timber frames, got into land development. Here in town, I was involved. I worked at Carriage Park. I worked at Panther Mountain, which is now Cliffs Community. I worked in Asheville at Reynolds Mountain. So a lot of experience later in land developing and building structures.
So you've seen a lot of change in this area in those years?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing, there was only one traffic light before you hit the airport.
Wow.
When I moved here, and there's monuments that only locals would know, like the Dutch Inn at the intersection of 191 and 25. You can't say, well, turn left at the Dutch Inn because it actually had a windmill. Well, it's long gone.
Yeah. It seems like you're doing great work here at the VFW. Do you want to tell me a little bit how you became involved with VFW Post 5206?
Well, I joined in 2004. I had written a book in which I interviewed my neighborhood in Haywood Knolls, and thought it would help me to promote the book to be a member of VFW. I didn't think I was qualified, but my year in Korea counted, so I joined then. Really didn't do anything. But in about 2019, 2020, I learned, I was a life member of the VFW. I learned that they were in danger of being closed, and so I started to get more interested. And I was living in D.C. To back up a little bit, in 2007, I had my own building company, building big custom homes in Asheville, and retired. And the Army had asked for retirees to volunteer for recall, and I volunteered to do that. And it was only for a year. They needed folks in Iraq and Afghanistan. I accepted Iraq, and then they said, well, there's something in Afghanistan sooner, and I'd rather go to Afghanistan. So I trained up at Fort Bragg for 2 months, and then was in Panjshir province in Afghanistan, assigned to the 101st Airborne. And while I was overseas, the year was 2008, I kind of looked back at home and said, the construction industry, there's nothing to come back to. While I was gone, my wife had moved to D.C. to do something. I found a job, got an apartment, and halfway through my tour overseas, I contacted the personnel back in the States and said, hey, can I stay in longer? And they said, yeah, we have a job for you at the Pentagon. If you'd like to be on a study at the Pentagon, we could send you there. So long story short, I went there. Was there for 2 years, getting ready to get back out. Meanwhile, my wife had gotten a job at the State Department, and we thought we might just stay in D.C. for a while. But before I left, I was about 90 days out, and an assignment came down. From Arlington National Cemetery, they needed people to work on another project. And I said, hey, why don't you let me go? I'm leaving anyway, and I'll wrap this up. And they sent me over there, and when I got there, I kind of realized that they weren't looking, this is my humble opinion, looking at the mission broadly enough. And I convinced them to do more with it. And long story short, I stayed there 27 months. And a lot of it was correcting records. But there I learned a lot about how to do research, a lot how the government worked, how systems worked, how to do deep research. And did a lot of good at Arlington. The job ended, and again, decided to stay there. So I got a job in the federal government as a civilian worker, first at Housing and Urban Development and their Inspector General's office. I was there for 3 years, and then a promotion opportunity came up at USDA, so I went over to USDA and stayed there 4 years. And the last year was during COVID, and meanwhile I was building a house here in downtown Hendersonville, and we came home just to do a walkthrough punch-out, and it just happened to be the week they shut the government down. And fortunately, my wife and I both brought our computers home, and so we worked for another year teleworking from Hendersonville, and then we finally decided to retire. This is about 3 years ago. Along with all this, I rejoined the VFW and got involved in, well, by that time, they had decided to sell the building, and the county bought it. We were meeting at Guidon Brewery.
Yep.
One of our members was Mike Baer,
Mike Baer.
Mike Baer's the owner of that, and we met over there until the building got finished, and we moved back in here. So that's kind of the story there. While in that period, I started a project called the Wall of Honor, and it's a project in which we take service members' awards and ribbons and badges and put them in 8 by 10 inch shadow boxes and put them on the wall with their names on it. And they didn't have to be any service. It could be short term, full careers, and we just wanted to honor our veterans in a little different way. By doing that. And so the wall's got 50 people on it. It's a public display. As long as this is a public building, and people can see this. And I worked with Mike Morgan of the county, and we developed a sheet on each of the person there that's on their website, so you can look at the ribbons and say, well, I don't know what that means, but you go to the website, it tells you what all the ribbons are, and it also allows the veterans, if they have photography, to put photography there, so you can. It's a pretty nice display, and you can see an awful lot.
And it's great how it greets you right when you come through the front door. So, I got to ask you, which was harder duty, Afghanistan or Washington D.C.?
I enjoy both.
Yeah.
It's neat to go back in the service because no opportunity for promotion, but also no efficiency reports. And so you weren't making decisions based on is this good for my career or not.
Right.
It gave you a lot of freedom. So I really enjoyed the second. It was actually 6 years. One in Afghanistan, two at the Pentagon, two at Arlington. And could just do what I wanted to do and have fun and not worry about my career, take a lot of chances, because if you're in a career, you worry about that, especially a government career. And I just made a lot of decisions that probably would have gotten me fired if they didn't work out, but fortunately everything I decided to do worked out.
How political is that environment?
You have to be aware, we always had this story about you never want to be above the fold of the Washington Post. And at Arlington, they were above the fold about 4 times when I was there. So you really had to be careful of who you talked to. It was an embarrassing episode for the Army. And at the Pentagon, we did. I went to a lot of think tanks, which I didn't even know existed, and got to see the future of the Army and see what people were thinking. And then after I got out, the things I was working on came to fruition. So I actually got to. Not much of a role there other than reporting, but I got to see how the military was going to change, and then it did change in that direction.
Right. Did you see a challenge with the VFW Post 5206? Did you feel like you needed to step in and help out with, because there was a tumultuous time here at the VFW Post, and it almost was closed at one point, you had mentioned.
Yes. It is. It's still we're in the rebuilding phase. It is a long ways to go, but we're working on a number of initiatives that hopefully would build our membership. And you know, the thing is, you just can't come to a meeting and have a bunch of reports. Right. You got to have something to do, and feel like you're contributing to the community. So we do that to a degree, but I wanted to make more programs. So we give back. Part of VFW is. One is to take care of the veterans. The other one is to support the community, to show how the veterans can support. They did it once when they served, and now they can do it again.
Yeah. What are some programs that you would like to mention and highlight that people get involved with?
Well, one thing I've received a lot with is I'm a student of military history, and I have one of my members, retired Commander Jerry Lawton. When he joined, he said, hey, my hobby is researching missing in action service members. I said, well, that's interesting. I've heard we have at least one from Henderson County. And when he joined, I had this person came to the meetings. I talked at civic clubs and at the library about our Wall of Honor, trying to let people be aware of it. And this one person came to every meeting and said, hey, I know this guy who lived downtown Hendersonville, and he's an MIA, and can you do some research? I said, I don't have the capability. And when Jerry Lawton joined, after like the 4th meeting with him, I took this information, and Jerry Lawton found all kinds of stuff. And then beyond that, he found more MIAs from Henderson County. And then he found even more. And then we got to the point where we had identified 11. And I thought, well, we do shadow boxes. We should honor those missing in action. And so we made 11 shadow boxes for those missing, had a ceremony, and we advertised. We didn't advertise. There was a story about us in the Lightning, and it went out, and one of the readers said, hey, you missed 2. And I said, whoa. I didn't know that. And what I had down here at the building is a list of the 143 folks from World War II from Henderson County that passed. So Jerry Lawton just showed me a list of all the North Carolina MIAs, so I compared the 2 lists, very similar to what I was doing at Arlington, and found the 11. And then what about these 2? And on the wall here, they were misspelled. Names were misspelled, so I missed them. So I went back and found them and found 2 more. So we actually had 13 that were missing in action from Henderson County, even though the story advertising it said 11. I didn't have the shadow boxes ready for the ceremony, but I was able to talk about the two that I discovered. One was on the Arizona, and one was Luther Rhodes, who was killed at Guadalcanal in 1942. And we had the ceremony, we had a taps, we had a rifle salute, and then after that it just dawned on me, why don't we try to find some of these MIAs?
Right.
As I mentioned before, I woke up one day and said to myself, I'm going to find Luther Rhodes. And I said it out loud, and it's nuts. And I found him. In about 2 months, or maybe a little more than that. But
And your focus is World War II MIAs primarily?
Well, the only ones MIAs are from World War II.
Okay.
For Henderson County. There are some from the Korean War and from the Vietnam War and even Desert Storm, but none have a nexus with Henderson County.
Okay. And Luther Rhodes, Marine Corps private, he grew up here.
Yep, grew up in Hendersonville, Eddyville. And I know his nephew, Larry Rhodes, and his wife, Lois, known them for about 35 years. And what's intriguing about Luther is he joined at 17. He looked like he was 14. And his photograph is just endearing to see this young kid missing for 83 years. And so I decided to focus on him and doing research similar to what I did at Arlington Cemetery. I found all kinds of sources. Jerry Lawton helped me a bit. And the deeper I looked, the more I found. And then, like at Arlington, I'd find things that contradicted it, so I'd have to keep going deeper. There were 2 books written about Luther. There's organizations that actually privately look for missing in action folks, mostly in the Pacific. And so he was mentioned in this website about called Pacific Rex. The 2 books mentioned him a lot. One of the books had a grid coordinate, and my wife were at home when we found that, hey, let's go to Google Maps, and let's see if we can't find where they say he was buried. And we go to Google Maps, and sure enough, we're in Guadalcanal.
Wow.
And we kind of driving down the street and looking around, and then I noticed, well, there's a cemetery. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then I noticed there's a Seventh-day Adventist church, and said, I've got a cousin who lives here that's connected to the church. Maybe he can get us connected to the Guadalcanal church. So we're getting ready to do that. And I keep looking, and then I discover that all the bodies buried there had been moved in 1946. But also what we discovered in Guadalcanal is the entire jungle battlefield is totally covered with buildings. So the battlefield is not there anymore. The cemetery, all that's left is a monument. And thought I was at a dead end. And then looked some more and found that they moved the cemetery, and the ones that were known in the cemetery, they sent them home. The ones they didn't know, split them between Hawaii and the Philippines and places there. But in the reading that I had, this eyewitness account of Luther being killed and being carried off the battlefield, and then there's all kinds of records of he and his family writing to the Marine Corps trying to find them, and they finally said, we've lost them. Kept digging and digging, and Larry turned me on to Marvin, who happens to be Luther's brother. Marvin lives in Eddyville, and I went over to Marvin's house, the house that Luther grew up in, and talked to him, and he had all kinds of memorabilia. And Marvin had told me that he had been, over the years, and we're talking 83 years, there's an organization called the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency that keeps in contact with family members of those missing, and was in contact with him and had regional meetings, and he had gone to regional meetings. And in 2017, they thought they found Luther, and they asked Marvin to give them some DNA, and he did, and discovered it wasn't him. So when I talked to Marvin, he said he'd just given up. And I told him I'd still like to look. I think, there's this crazy random chance I can find Luther if we keep pushing. Concurrent to this, Senator Ted Budd, one of his staffers contacted me just randomly, nothing to do with this. The senator wanted him to talk to VFW people and talk about the needs of veterans. And meanwhile, I was working on this big packet of all this information I found that I was going to give to somebody. And I had it on my desk when Kai Lauder came in, his assistant, and he looked over the desk. Hey, I know that guy. That's my great uncle.
Wow.
So anyway, it took a little while, but I put a packet together and sent it to Senator Budd's office in the middle of August, and said, can you pull some strings, talk to the Defense POW MIA accounting agency, see if we maybe get them interested in Luther again. And on September 3rd, 2025, Marvin calls me. He found him.
Wow. That's incredible.
It is.
So this whole time, the family just thought he was lost somewhere in the South Pacific.
Yeah, well, they knew that he was lost in Guadalcanal, and they had his records of him being taken to that cemetery.
Yeah.
But then they my theory was somewhere along the line that he just became an unknown. They lost the identification of him. And one of the books talked about a little more than 200 Marines who were lost in Guadalcanal, that they were killed there. And imagine it's in the middle of a battle in this jungle environment, so they couldn't get them physically to a collection point. They would mark it as best they could, bury them, and then after the war or later, they went back and found most, but lost 200. And my theory was that Luther was buried, but then unknown. And then in 46, when they moved everybody, he was put someplace.
Wow. How did the family react to that?
Marvin just couldn't believe it. He's and his wife and the extended family here. It's a miracle, absolute miracle.
Yeah. Some people just don't understand what it's like to be missing someone in their family and have closure like that on a situation. That's priceless.
Yeah, I've been asked, but surprisingly, why would we do it? From my mind to mind, you'd be a soldier, but a part of the ethos of the military is leave no man behind.
Right.
And we left Luther behind, and there's 82,000 left behind, 71,000 from World War II, and then I forget the numbers of Korean War, Vietnam War. And there's 2 left from Desert Storm. But and this organization, its entire focus is to find them, and they're actively doing that, and they're working with all kinds of other organizations. And again, there's independent volunteers looking for them. They find on average about 200 a year, and there is an effort going. Part of my premise of writing and dealing with the senator was I thought the agency was underfunded. And having worked in the government, especially the Pentagon, and at Arlington, I can look at organizations that I could see that some are well funded and some I thought were underfunded, and it may be a little bit of push from the public to say, hey, why don't you give more money to this organizations? They have the capability. These are really good people. They're really dedicated. If we had more of them, or they could do more research, they could find more people. And why don't we put emphasis on finding our missing?
Yeah. There's a reason the POW flag is beneath the American flag, and that's because of that principle of not leaving people behind. And
right.
Yeah. So it's incredible work that you're doing. Is there someone else on the horizon right now that you're working on?
Yes. I'm looking at 2 from the Philippines that were captured at May of 42. Pearl Harbor's December 7th. Henderson County had 3 people lost on December 7th, 2 of which the building are named after. And on the very next day, the Japanese invaded the Philippines. The military lasted until May, and then everyone was captured. They had what is known as the Bataan Death March. 2 people from Henderson County were captured. They both survived the Bataan Death March.
Wow.
And then there's a last accountability of one was in November 42, and I think one was January 43, and that was the last accountability. So we're pretty sure that they died in the POW camps. So I've been doing a lot of research on how that worked, and have a pretty good hunch that I'm putting together right now to forward to see if we can't find the other 2, or 2 from Henderson County that I believe there's a decent chance of finding them. You'd be surprised all the records that are out there. And unfortunate. The toughest part I'm finding is I haven't found next of kin yet, and I can't identify them without next of kin. So one of my efforts is to try to locate folks related to him so we can get some DNA, because that's what made Luther Rhodes work. We had DNA from Marvin.
Yeah.
And it just nuts to have a living next of sibling. These folks, a lot of the problem is in the military, people are young when they serve, and then if they die, they're young, and they don't leave much of a trace. And hard to get DNA, but not impossible. So I'm thinking for the two from Henderson County, if I can get the DNA, and I feel confident of the research I've done, that if I can get with the government, maybe a little help from Senator Budd, we can find these other two. There's others, but of the more than half of them lost at sea. I don't really have any hope at all. Either crashed in the ocean in planes or ships sunk. Those folks, I don't think there's any help.
Harder to find remains.
Right. Yeah. The ones that crashed on land, at some point, somebody's going to come across a cassine. One's in the Himalayas. One's in Italy. One's in, I think two are in Italy. One's in the Himalayas. The others are lost at sea. But still chance.
Yeah. When I was in the scuba diving industry, I made it to Palau a couple times and actually got to get to Peleliu, a scene of intense battle, Marines and Japanese forces. And I mean, even to this day, you can walk into a cave and you can find unexploded munitions and as well as human remains. So it's it's amazing that even to this day there are all kinds of folks who are unaccounted for from World War II so long ago.
But my feeling is they can be found if we put the effort into it.
Absolutely. Yep. What else is the VFW doing for veterans locally that you want to talk about? We
also, we're looking for them to help work with us. This MIA effort is, I'm asking folks who are helping us with that. We have events for veterans. We help, some folks get down on their luck. We have a fund to help them out. I don't think is a loss of, or not the right word. There's a lot of resources. In fact, the building we're in here right across the hall is the Veterans Services officers who really primarily seem to help, primarily do help with the VA in getting people the medical services they need, and also to ensure that sometimes records get lost. Part of the Wall of Honor, some of the folks had nothing, and I was able to, through research, find out their record of service, or DD-214, and from their DD-214 I could build a shadow box because it would tell me what awards they had. And these are cases often where it's World War II veterans and their kids are in their 70s, 80s, and they have a little bit, but they don't have much records. So I'm able to recreate by doing research and finding the documents. Right. So maybe a third of the people on the wall have actually had to do the research and to find them or to confirm that was the right person, that we're properly honoring them. Right. The next thing coming up is on the 10th of November. I'm going to do a talk at the library about the MIAs. It's interesting that I had already scheduled this before Luther remains were identified. But in it, I'm going to talk about the 12, 13, how they were lost so people could get an understanding of what happens to service members, and then ask for their help to show them what organizations can help, and if we can find relatives or just write letters to our elected representatives to let them know that there are people in America that still care about finding our veterans and care about leaving nobody behind. Right. So that talk is at 2 o'clock at the Kaplan Auditorium in downtown Hendersonville. On November 10th. 10th. Okay. Marine Corps birthday. Yeah, and what's also interesting is the organization, Defense POW MIA accounting agency, is coming to Hendersonville to meet with the Rhodes family on the 11th, and they're going to bring a forensic scientist and talk to the family out at Eddyville
Wow.
And I've been invited to see what they said. And I'll find out, a whole lot more detail than I know, and see if my efforts made this happen or maybe just coincidental. But get to see more about them, understand them better. So when I look at other people that we're looking for, can kind of point them in a way. And the organization does look for outside. I think they're affiliated with 130 different organizations. I know that there was a press release from the University of Hawaii. They have an archaeology department that's going to offer some help. Because in finding people, what they find is their remains or crash sites, and the archaeologists and forensic scientists are those that actually do the research, and then they match it up with DNA. Often when some of the remains might have their dog tags or something that would indicate that who it was. But others, all they have is bone fragments. But from that and DNA, they can identify them, bring them home, put them with their family, which is incredibly important.
Yeah. It must be incredibly rewarding to have closure on cases like Luther Rhodes. Must keep you going in your efforts.
Yeah. It just, in the ceremony we had back in May, I mentioned that when service members are they have their remains and they go through a ceremony with a flag wrapped around the coffin, and the representatives talks about the appreciation of the country, our grateful nation. And my answer is nothing. There's no flag.
Right.
There's no casket. There's nobody. There's no ceremony really, and so it is a big hole. Our situation in Gaza right now with we've got all the hostages back, but there's bodies that are missing, and people are you can tell how important it is to get remains back and put it in a family plot, or just to have whatever is left. That's a very human condition to want to get them back.
Yeah. A lot of veterans are reluctant to get help. So many more veterans are killed each year to suicide than they are to combat operations overseas. What would you tell veterans who are reluctant to get help?
They need to talk. Organizations like the VFW brings camaraderie. There's things. When I was doing research for my book at Haywood Knolls, I discovered that I was probably in 3/4 of the cases, they had never talked to anybody until they talked to me. Never talked to their family. They just came home from war and just moved on. When I came back from Afghanistan, I found the same situation. I enjoyed what I did, thought it was interesting, wanted to talk to people. Nobody wanted to talk about it. So I felt what they did. Whereas with veterans, if they're with other people, they feel comfortable and relaxed. One thing I did when I was up there is I started a writing program at Walter Reed called Walter Reed Wounded Warrior Writing Program, and I got permission from the hospital to go over there, and for a year, every Tuesday at 6 o'clock, I went to the barracks at Walter Reed and had wounded veterans come down and write stories about their experiences. And it was a small group, very loyal. One of the guys started a book there that got published. It's actually written 2 more books, but it came from my experiences of the World War II veteran didn't want to talk about it, and have my own personal experience. Nobody wanted to hear it, and then thought, well, why don't I do it freshly wounded off the battlefield soldiers and see if they want to write about it. And I found that they did, and they found that nobody wanted to talk to them either, because a lot of it they just don't understand. They do not understand what it's like, and if they do start talking and people want to change the subject or don't want to hear it, they just clam up, and the World War II guys clammed up for the rest of their life until the few that I talked to. But there's plenty that nobody wants to hear it, and they want to tell it, and it's just a shame.
How many World War II veterans are still alive in Henderson County, would you estimate?
Hundreds. There's actually one of the people in my book is on the wall and is still alive, and she is 101 years old.
Wow.
another person, a pilot, was 103. I talked to him before he passed. He passed recently, but he's on the wall. There's another person who's still alive, 100 years old, on the wall. There's a good number, and typically where you got to find them, most likely are at the nursing homes here. They're still there, and I found them to be very lucid. I was just surprised that when I was writing my book, they were telling me their serial numbers of their rifles and where their berth was on the ship, and I'm thinking, how can you remember that? But they could. They remembered those details they had to memorize when they were 20 years old.
Yeah. There was one World War II veteran on the recent Blue Ridge Honor Flight. There were 4 Korean War veterans, and then the rest were Vietnam era.
Okay.
But the World War II veterans are going fast, unfortunately, and their stories need to be told. And it's a wonderful thing that you're doing by recognizing those missing in action. How well does your organization play with other veteran organizations in the area?
We have a lot of co-membership with the American Legion. We're different than in our case, you have to be a veteran of foreign war, whereas the Legion, you just have to be a veteran or the son of a veteran. When we were homeless during the period when this building was being done, we spent, as I mentioned, sometime at Guidon, we spent probably another 6 months at the American Legion. So we do a lot of joint programs.
You've been out to the Veterans Healing Farm?
I have been to the Veterans. I'm very impressed with it. I went to the original one on Yale Road, and now that Yeck's got the new place, it's just fascinating what he's done. I'm kind of looking at his example to see how I could use his experiences and his programs to try to build my program up. Yeah,
Al's done a great job. It was so serendipitous that they lost their footing there where they were before, and they found this other place, and it's just worked out for the better.
It's Eden-like.
Yeah,
really nice.
Yeah, he's doing a lot of good there. I know I've kind of hopped around a little bit.
Talk about this.
Yeah.
So another program we're doing is I discovered, unfortunately, I didn't see him before he passed, but Colonel Joe Clemens lived in Hendersonville, and I've been working with his family, his daughter specifically, and has a lot of archives about him and helping to get these into museums and whatever. But Colonel Clemens is known for one thing, but probably should be known for two things. The thing he's best known for is there was a movie in 1959 called Pork Chop Hill.
Oh, yeah.
And in the battle, S.L.A. Marshall, a famous Army historian, wrote about Pork Chop Hill, and then wrote a book, and then wrote a screenplay, and Gregory Peck bought the screenplay and made the movie, and he personally played Joe Clemens.
No way.
And then during the movie, Joe Clemens by then was a Army captain. Army sent him out to Hollywood, and he actually was an advisor to Gregory Peck to play him in the movie.
Wow.
Again, he lived in Hendersonville about 15 years, passed a couple of years ago. I was able to get to work with his daughter and get some of his artifacts. And here at the VFW, we're getting ready to make a display on him. Where he was also interesting is during the Vietnam War, Colonel Clemens was a brigade commander in the Americal Division, and one of his battalion commanders was Norman Schwarzkopf.
Oh, wow.
And Norman, as you know, 4-star general, commander of Desert Storm.
Storm and Norman.
Storm and Norman has a book out, wrote a book, very popular. And if you read the book, you'll find when he talks about Joe Clemens, and there's an episode in there where a general came down to the battlefield, got a hold of then Lieutenant Colonel Norman Schwarzkopf, and said, "You're doing it all wrong. I'm getting ready to relieve you." And Joe Clemens steps inside. No, he's not doing it wrong. He's doing what I tell him to do. He's a good guy. Leave him alone. And so rather than, you never would have heard of Norman Schwarzkopf because he would have been relieved in the field.
Wow.
Joe Clemens stepped in. Unfortunately, because he stepped in, the general gave a bad report for Joe Clemens.
Oh, no.
He retired as a full colonel. But Joe Clemens was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross during, actually it was before Pork Chop Hill, but in that time period, the Distinguished Service Cross is second to the Medal of Honor. So that's a very rare. He's on our wall. The highest award of anybody there is Joe Clemens. And I've got a uniform. I have two uniforms of him: the actual sweater that he wore during the Battle of Pork Chop Hill, and his military fatigues that he wore when he was in Vietnam.
Wow!
And so we're putting a display together about that, and that and a poster that talks about Joe Clemens. But again, things we do in the VFW is let people be aware of veterans and what they do and their connection. Our nexus with veterans here in Henderson County. And Joe Clemens is an incredible example of that.
Korea and Vietnam. Wow. True hero.
True hero and good guy. And it's interesting. I had no idea how big or small he was until I got his uniform. And he was an adult small. But and he never was wounded, so I figured, well, maybe being small,
yeah,
you won't not going to get wounded if you're a little bitty guy.
But big character.
Yeah, Norman Schwarzkopf got wounded twice. So.
Wow.
But he's a great big guy.
Yeah. It sounds like Henderson County has an incredible history, incredible military history, and you're helping preserve that history.
It's 143 died in World War II, which is a crazy amount relative to the size of this of the county, and certainly we've lost some all the way into the current the previous war, the global war on terrorism. We've lost 3 or 4 people from there, in Vietnam and the Korean War. One of the Korean War folks, Sam Watkins, was an MIA for a while, and then they finally found him, and he was buried, I think, in 2021. They brought him home, but he was MIA since 1953, and so that's an example of the organization that found Luther Rhodes, found Sam Watkins, and he's in our cemetery here in town, and again an MIA for the Korean War.
Henderson County saw soldiers fight for the Union and the South in Civil War, even going back that far.
Yeah,
incredible history. Do you do any work on that Civil War era stuff?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I like World War II, military history in general. Right now, I'm actually reading about the American Revolution. Rick Atkinson's got a 3-series a trilogy on that. I'm in the first one, and just things I just didn't realize happened in the Revolutionary War in the American Army, and we have our anniversary next year, the 250. So I wanted to know about the beginning, and there's books Atkinson have written about World War II, and also about Iraq. So great writer, but looking back at the Revolution, thing I just didn't think about or realize what had happened back then. So it's topical to now.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think your focus is going to shift, moving forward into the future as you do get closure on some of these World War II vets and as, the generations move into the future? Are you going to start looking at the Korean War more and the Vietnam War more? And
probably in the history, our biggest challenge is increasing our membership, and that has to do with getting younger members. Most of our membership is much older. We have a couple that are in their 40s from the global war on terrorism. We know the future is that if we don't get them interested and have programs that would appeal to younger veterans, it's going to be tough to stay alive. So our biggest challenge really is to meet their needs. They would come to a meeting and see if they wanted to be with us and do what we're doing. And if we have programs that don't do that, it's a struggle for us. I've started another initiative for making our members what I call early responders. When I went to Afghanistan, I was sent into a A problem is that we were very far away from the headquarters. We were all by ourselves. There were only 30 of us way up in the Himalayas, and we were trained to be combat lifesavers. And each of us were giving tourniquets and devices to cut seatbelts in case we get trapped, and learned how to be first responders for ourselves, because we were, at that time, the standard was 2 hours to get a helicopter. Later on, after I left, they got it down to 1 hour, but we knew it would be very hard to find us. So it just dawned on me one day that how you're going to die in a, let's say, an automobile accident is you're going to bleed out, lose an arm or a leg, just like a soldier blown up, or you're going to be trapped in a vehicle and burn up or drowned. And having that equipment on me when I was in Afghanistan, when I came home, I kept it in my car, and thinking that if I ever came across a traffic accident and I'm the first one there, and I'm there before the medics, the EMTs get there, and somebody's going to absolutely die. They're trapped in a car, can't get out, it's on fire. I have a device in my vehicle that I can cut them out and break their window, cut them out. And if they have a traumatic amputation, I can deal with that before they bleed out, and realizing that can happen within 5 minutes. So what we've done here is I bought the equipment, and each of our members, I've actually issued it to them and gave them some training. Last meeting we had training from a city fireman, Henderson County fireman, to properly put on a tourniquet. I had people brought some canvas in and had them cut it to prove that they can cut a seatbelt out, and also the device that would break a window. And again, realizing that in combat you can die very quickly, bleeding out or burning up. Same thing can happen in the civilian world. And while you have very good response, especially Henderson County's got incredible life-saving response, very quick. But in those couple of minutes, if it just so happened that a VFW member came upon the scene, I would say he wouldn't shy away. They would go to the sound of the guns, as they say, and they would do something and save somebody's life. So I've started that initiative and talked to the folks at the district and the state and say, listen, you have a million VFW members. Why don't we very inexpensively give them this stuff? And if they're there before the medics gets there and it's clear that they're going to die, why don't we have somebody that's trained and equipped to do that? So that's another initiative.
That's fantastic.
That we've started.
Yep. How do folks get in touch with you or the organization if they want to help in some way, if they have information that might lead to identifying someone, or if they're a veteran that needs some help? How do they contact you?
But probably the best thing is to come down to the VFW. We have information there. A good point that I absolutely need help to locate, especially the two folks that survived the Bataan Death March and are in the ground somewhere in the Philippines. If I can get their DNA, I think we can find them and bring them home. So that's how they could help. Yeah. They could also help us monetarily. The wall is not free. Right. It's free to veterans, but it's not free to us. We do fundraising or a lot of times, unfortunately or fortunately, we out of our pocket. Yeah. We make things happen. We believe in them enough that if we can't get financial report, we're going to make it happen anyway.
So you're in a nice new facility on Main Street, just north of downtown.
You have 5 Points across from Hendersonville High School. It's open 5 days a week. The VFSO office, the Veteran Service Officers, are here. And it's a county building, so there's lots of activities here. So I've already talked to people who've been here from civic clubs, and they said they really, especially upstairs, the big ballroom. They have meetings here because it is a county building, and if they come downstairs, they'll see our wall, and they would I think be impressed that we're honoring veterans in a very very definitive way. And among other things, that stuff on the wall would be eventually thrown away. That's what happens. That's what happens to that stuff, is go down 3 generations and they have no idea what it is, and they're cleaning out Grandpa's attic, and it gets thrown in the dumpster. And we're trying to preserve that, to honor them and to show that Henderson County and the VFW cares about its veterans,
Yeah.
and that's what that wall does. It shows we care.
Yeah.
We also can. I'm working with. I'm in the beginning of working with some JRTCs to get them to come over here and look at the wall. I have a program to kind of talk about all the different services, systems of awards and badges and whatever. RTC cadets would be interested in that, and I think if they saw the real stuff and understood a little bit more about it. So I'm trying to get JRTCs to come over here and look at that and use the wall as the example, and just kind of show them the military system of awards and also badges and patches and how the rank systems work. I think they would be interested in that, and the wall is just a great resource for that.
It's also encouraging to see recruiting numbers continue to go up around the country. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice that you would give to a young person who is considering the military as a path?
Being a veteran, there are so many benefits for joining. It is just incredible. I mean, you think about. I had a VA loan on a house once. I have 3 master's degrees, all paid for by the government, free graduate degrees. If they're not that far, they're college degrees. Their medical help for the rest of their life. The experiences they're going to have, they're going to see the world, pretty much. If they get overseas, they see something they never would have had that opportunity before. People worry about wars. I mean, yes and no. In my first 20 years, there were no wars. And right now we're a little dicey, but not as much as we were for the last 20 years. But people grow from their military experience, and they get job skills. It's interesting, the Space Force intrigues me because all the jobs in the Space Force, the training they're going to get is just going to be amazing. Yeah. And if they get out, they're going to be so valuable to employers on this cutting edge space technology, IT technology. I've got a family friend, a young woman just graduated from high school, joined the Navy. She's in the nuclear propulsion school at Charleston. She got a $75,000 bonus to join. Now, of course, she has to get through the 2-year program, and she did very well on her ASVAB test, but that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And
then she's going to have this skill set in nuclear propulsion. Holy moly. There's certainly a career, but beyond that.
Yeah.
You just meet so many people who learn their skill or just grew up. Sometimes it's a matter of growing up.
Yeah.
Not knowing what to do and seeing a standard of behavior that the military will give you and to be honored by other folks. And again, very different world. I can't see any downsides. And in my own case, the education and the VA, medical, and also the loan, home loan, just it's a no-brainer, really. And hard, yes, but not that hard.
Sometimes I think you're 18 years old and you think, 4 years is such a long time, or even 20 years, but you're 22 after you do 4 years, or you're 38 after you do 20. It's like you have your whole life ahead of you still, and you're truly prepared for life.
Yeah, we are a grateful nation. And I think we take care of our veterans. There are hiccups along the way,
sure.
But generally we do respect and take care of our veterans. You just can't deny that. And they get more out of it, I believe, than they get a whole lot out of the service, regardless if it's the 4-year commitment or the career.
Yeah.
And the career, you get a retirement for the rest of your life.
Right.
And if you're young, you probably got to get another job. If you stay longer, you probably not. My dad retired as a full colonel, never worked another day in his life. But his retirement was good enough to do that, and along the way. But if you're younger still, you're so set up. What I learned when I was at the Pentagon, all the civilians were retired full colonels. And in the civilian jobs, they were GS-15, so they were making close to $300,000 a year between the two, the two retirements, or the job and then the retirement, and then the skills they learned in the military qualified them for the job, the federal job. plus I was hired and had a preference, and I know that, to be hired for 7 years. I love what I did, love serving my country, again, not in uniform, but as a civilian, working and doing important government work. I was thrilled to do that and felt honored and felt appreciated and felt I did good things.
Well, it's a grateful nation, and we're also a grateful community, and we're grateful for all that you do. So thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Mm-hmm. And thank you for inviting me into your beautiful new facility here. This is our first podcast on the road.
Oh, great.
So,
great.
Yeah, appreciate you having me come in.
Well, thank you for the opportunity as well.
Keep up the great work, and I hope that maybe this spurs some people to provide you with some information that leads to someone else being identified.
Mm-hmm. That would be another miracle.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
The Kudzu Project is made possible by the Lucy Agency, helping businesses across the South grow deep roots and stand out. Based in Hendersonville, North Carolina, this full-service marketing firm builds handcrafted websites, eye-catching logos, and social media that pops for businesses and organizations. Because if your story's worth telling, it's worth telling right. Learn more at lucyagency.com. That's LUCEY agency.com.
Everyone has a story, and at the Kudzu Project, we want to hear yours. Go to kudzuproject.com and fill out our story submission form. You can write your story for us to read on the podcast, request to be interviewed, or even nominate someone else whose story deserves to be told. The Kudzu Project is all about capturing the voices and spirit of our community, and your story could be the next one we share. Visit kudzuproject.com and tell your story today.